This is a map made in 1602 by the Chinese in collaboration with Western map makers. This map, though mimicking Western styles, has Chinese names on it, and some of them are Western names, which are then written so that it can be easily read by the Chinese. And as you can see all around, it's Chinese. Now, this map, of course, is not the first time that the Chinese have heard of faraway lands as far as Africa or America, as we discussed last time, that even the Cape of Good Hope was written down in a chart. But where could this chart have gotten its information from? If this chart was from the 1400s and was there before the Portuguese had gotten there, then the Chinese must have had a lot of information about people outside of these regions. Well, we have a book that is written in the 1200s, and this book is written in somewhat detail of various lands in the Middle East, Europe, Africa, and Asia. The book is called Shufanshi, which translates to foreign lands or travels through foreign lands. And I will start with Mecca as it is the closest to Africa, and the next one is Zanzibar. It says, the country of Makia is reached if one travels from the country of Maulapa for 80 days westward by land. This is the place where the Buddha Mahiawa was born. In the house of the Buddha, the walls are made of jade stone of every color. Every year, when the anniversary of the death of the Buddha comes round, the people from all the countries of the Tashi assemble here. When they vie with each other in bringing presents of gold, silver, jewels, and precious stones. Then also is the house of adorned anew with silk brocade. Farther off there is a tomb of the Buddha. Continually by day and night there is at this place such a brilliant refulgence that no one can approach it. He who does loses his sight. Whosoever in the hour of his death rubs his breast with dirt taken from this tomb will, they say, be restored to life again by the power of the Buddha. Now, of course, the Buddha that they're talking about in here is Muhammad, and they're calling him the Buddha because this is referenced from the Chinese point of view. The next one is Zanzibar, or as the Chinese call him, Zongba. The Zongba country is on an island of the sea south of Hucha-Ala. To the west, it reaches to a great mountain. The inhabitants are of Tashi stock and follow the Tashi religion. They wrap themselves in blue foreign cotton stuffs and wear red leather shoes. Their daily food consists of meal, baked cakes, and mutton. They are of many villages and a succession of wooded hills and terraced rocks. The climate is warm, and there is no cold season. The products of the country consist of elephant tusks, native gold, and ambergris, and yellow sandalwood. Every year, Hucha-Ala and the Tashi localities along the seacoast send ships to this country with white cotton cloth, porcelain, copper, and red cotton to trade. Given that this place is an island and the fact that they talk about the mountains and the wooded hills and the terraced rock, they're probably talking about the island of Kilwa and the trade that they have with Oman. The Zanj regions, which are written as the Berbera coast, Pibalo, as you will see, will reflect the animals found in East Africa. The country of Bibalo contains four cities. The other places are all villages which are constantly at feud and fighting with each other. The inhabitants pray to heaven and not to Buddha. The land produces many camels and sheep, and the people feed themselves with the flesh and milk of camels, and with baked cakes. The other products are ambergris, big elephant tusks, and big rhinoceros horns. There are elephant tusks which weigh over 100 catties, and rhinoceros horns of over 10 catties weight. The land is also rich in puchik, liquid storex gum, myrrh, and tortoiseshell of extraordinary thickness, for which there is great demand in other countries. The country brings forth also the so-called camel crane, which measures from the ground to its crown from 6 to 7 feet. It has wings and can fly, but not to any great height. There is also in this country a wild animal called Sula. It resembles a camel in shape, an ox in size, and is of a yellow color. Its forelegs are 5 feet long, its hind legs only 3 feet. Its head is high up and turned upwards. Its skin is an inch thick. There is also in this country a kind of mule with brown, white, and black stripes around its body. These animals wander about the mountain wilds. They are a variety of the camel. The inhabitants of this country, who are great huntsmen, hunt these animals with poisoned arrows. Next, he talks about the Somali coast, Chung Li. The inhabitants of Chung Li country go bareheaded and barefooted. They wrap themselves in cotton stuffs, but they dare not wear jackets, for the wearing of jackets and turbans is a privilege reserved to the ministries and the king's courtiers. The king lives in a brick house covered with glazed tiles, but the people live in huts made of palm leaves and covered with grass thatched roofs. Their daily food consists of baked flour cakes, sheep's and camel's milk. There are great numbers of cattle, sheep, and camels among the countries of the Tashi. This is the only one which produces frankincense. There are many sorcerers among them who are able to change themselves into birds, beasts, or aquatic animals, and by these means keep the ignorant people in a state of terror. If some of them in trading with some foreign ship have a quarrel, the sorcerers pronounce a charm over the ship, so that it can neither go forward nor backwards, and they only release the ship when it has settled the dispute. The government has formally forbidden this practice. Every year, countless numbers of birds of passage alight in the desert parts of this country. When the sun rises, they suddenly disappear so that one cannot find a trace of them. The people catch them with nets and eat them. They are remarkably savory. They are in season till the end of spring, but as soon as summer comes they disappear, to come back the following year. When one of the inhabitants dies, and they are about to bury him in the coffin, his kinsfolk from near and far come to condole, each person flourishing a sword in his hand, goes in and asks the mourners the cause of the person's death. If he was killed by the hand of a man, each one says, "We will revenge him on the murderer with these swords." Should the mourners reply that he was not killed by anyone, but that he came to his end by the will of heaven, they throw away their swords and break into violent wailing. Every year there are driven on the coast a great many dead fish, measuring 200 feet in length and 20 feet through the body. The people do not eat the flesh of these fish, but they cut out their brains, marrow, and eyes, from which they get oil, often as much as 300 odd tong from a single fish. They mix this oil with lime to chalk their boats and use it also in lamps. The poor people use the ribs of these fish to make rafters, the backbones for door leaves, and they cut off vertebrae to make mortars. There is a mountain in this country which forms the boundary of Pipa Lo. It is 4,000 li around it, for the most part uninhabited. Dragon's blood is procured from this mountain, also aloes, and from the waters around it tortoise shells and ambergris. It is not known whence ambergris comes. It suddenly appears in lumps of from 3 to 5 or 10 catties in weight, driven on the shore by the wind. The people of this country make haste to divide it up, or ship run across it at sea and fish it up. And finally, there's Sohar or Wupar in the Somali coast. And they say about this one, the country of Wupar is on the sea coast, and a land road leads hence to the Tashi. The king is of a dark brown complexion. He wears a turban and a jacket. He follows both the religion and the rules of the daily life of the Tashi. The thing you can see here is that clearly this work was done by a Chinese person, well, a bunch of Chinese people, because some of it is copying older writings. And yes, I'm saying that even older than this, there are writings that are around, which I'll read later, that depict the people from other parts of the world, including Africa, going back. You can see here in Sumatra, obviously, they depict the very dark complexion and the curly hair of the people. Now, it's interesting to know why would they bother to do this, but of course, these are their trade partners, so why wouldn't they? They needed to know exactly what they were missing out on in different areas. And the things they write about, you can tell is the stuff they care about the most, because there's a bunch of stuff that was happening in those regions that doesn't happen. By the way, the mule like creature they describe in East Africa is a zebra, and the animal with its hind legs turned backwards is obviously a giraffe. So, looking at these statements, it's pretty easy to understand how the Portuguese person who ran into the Javan pilot, how they found somebody holding a chart that is documenting all the lands of the world, including the Americas, before the Europeans had even gotten there. And I don't want to play down this map just because it was collaborated with Europeans, which is something else, which is a trick that is usually used. If Europeans were somewhere, then we have to abandon it as part of the history of those areas. But no, it's an important map that was built, probably using names and charts that existed at the time, fixed with the Western maps. And these type of maps will be found in almost every place, Kingdom of Congo, everywhere, because of course they traded with these people. They are maps that were taken from the Kingdom of Congo, even though they're very difficult to find because such information is not very valuable, and so people don't put them out there in the public, and instead they have them in public, in private collections and stuff like that, probably rolled up and collecting dust. The interesting thing about this writing, by the way, is how early it is. Not this map. This map is from 1602, but the writing is from, 1200 and something. And that's interesting because a lot of the Zanj regions, a lot of the civilizations that lived there, if it wasn't for people like this, people like the Arabs, people like the Chinese, a lot of those civilizations were being alleged to have started somewhere in the 16 to 1700s. Luckily, we have writings that go back from Al Masudi and all these people that show that these civilizations go back to like 500, 200 BC, 200 AD, and possibly even to BC with the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. The interesting thing about the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea is it also pulls back the date that the Bantu people could have been in that time, because obviously people say that the Bantu people arrived in East Africa close to AD, but it doesn't make sense if you consider the fact that the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea says there are civilizations that they spot in those regions, and there is no, and I'll say it again, no tribe that existed before the Bantus in that region that you can even point to and allege they created civilizations close to how the Periplus describes. So obviously, the Bantu tribes that got to that region must have made civilizations going back to 300-400 BC in those regions. It's very possible, but we don't know.